I'm going to hit the record button. I've got it recording now. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today as we get started with an interview, a discussion today about what's going on and maybe how can we heal. So, again, I'd like to welcome Gail. And Gail, I'd like for you to share a bit about yourself, where you came from, where you are now, what's going on in your life, just to give people a little idea of who you are.
Okay. Well, let's see. I know you because we met in Santa Maria. So I consider Santa Maria my hometown because I moved there when I was 11, and spent my formative, years there and stuff. And then I moved from Santa Maria and went to school at San Francisco State. I transferred up there, majored in broadcasting. And then I came to Santa Cruz because another guy that we knew, Gilbert Moreno, and I started a performing arts company here. So that's what brought me to Santa Cruz to do theater. And and then once I got here and realized I needed to make a living, I got him into local county government, and that became a career for 33 years that I spent in local government, and not just in Santa Cruz, but in Monterey County as well. And so I got married, bought a house, had kids. So yeah, so now I am a resident. I've been in Santa Cruz for over 30 years, and I'm involved in the community and theater, local theater, which is one of my passions. I love directing, writing, um, performing, pretty much anything that happens in theater. And then I also, almost a year and a half ago, started DJing a gospel music show alternating Sundays on a new local radio station. So my uh, radio name is AKA Ms. G.
Yes,
And
G.
so, yeah, so I do that. So I'm a fairly, you know, busy person in terms of life and activities, even with the shelter in place. So, but I am very much a member, I think, of Santa Cruz community. Although I did commute the last 9 years of my, or last 10 years of my work life. So that was a little bit different, not being in the community every day and stuff. So, but I'm here, and Santa Cruz is my home.
Oh, well, Santa Cruz is absolutely gorgeous. I've been up there and stayed with friends, and I'm now that I know you're there, I'm going to have to come on by.
Come on by.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And you are presently in your she shed. Can you talk just a little bit about your she shed? I love it because I'm a
Yeah, my she shed is a 1997 Road Trek Popular that I bought about 2.5 years ago from a gal. And because I always wanted an RV, just couldn't figure out how I was going to make it happen. Way our house is situated, there's not a lot of big things that you could get down here. So this is perfect because it's 17 feet bumper to bumper. It's about 6.5 feet wide. So it's a little petite thing that can fit in a normal parking spot. And I don't get to take it out nearly as much as I would like because of a family member's health issue. But it is my she shed, so I can come out here, and it is a respite for me because I can just walk in and it becomes a space that's just very peaceful for me. And so I do all of my Zoom meetings and things like that out here. I come out, I write out here, and sometimes I just come and sit. So
fabulous.
it's a really very healing space, and I'm so grateful for it. I really am. So
Right, right. And I know that life is kind of tricky right now for you, and you're definitely going through it. I want to breathe with you on that because whew, that's why you have that great little spot to go out in your driveway and just hang out and read a book, whatever. With this COVID-19 and with the situation at your home, you mentioned that your husband is compromised, and so you're taking heed to that. But I just wondered, you were saying something about life hasn't really changed for you as of right now. It seems a lot of people have changed, but what's going
well,
on there?
to a certain to a certain degree, it hasn't changed for us because when you have someone who's going through um, treatment and has a compromised immune system, we were already doing a number of the things in terms of limiting contact with folks. Any friends that came over, we needed to make sure that they weren't ill. Um, he doesn't drive. He hasn't driven for the last almost 2 years. So he goes out when I take him out. We don't tend to go out to a lot of public places or anything. So we were doing that already. And then when we'd come out of a store, we would always hand sanitize and wash our hands anyway. So
Right.
that part and our aspect of this COVID-19 pandemic isn't so new for us. We've stepped up our what I want to say, hand
Pro-
sanitizing, just our
protocol. Yeah.
protocols. We've stepped those up a
Sure.
lot since
Sure.
then. But it is something that we've been aware of for pretty much the last 5 years. So um, I think the thing that's hardest has been for me because I've been able to go out and have other social contact. So for me, the COVID-19 has been um, the shelter in place has been more probably, I won't say traumatic, but dramatic in terms of just not being able to have those outside contacts with friends. Because I'm a much more social person than my husband
Yeah.
is. So,
Yeah. I do know that from our years
yeah,
being in high
so,
school. Yes, you were
yeah,
you were you
so,
got, always had that big beautiful smile as you do now. You know, Gail, how should I step into this? This whole thing lately with George Floyd has really turned many people upside down. We've got the COVID-19, we've got the masks, we've got people's opinions, we've got switches flipping on, off, people shaming each other online, you know, if you're on Facebook much. I've been shamed. And I know there's a lot of fear. And then you add all of this. And I guess what I want to ask you, you've had some interesting stories happen, and I want to get into that. But first of all, what are your thoughts on much of this as living in this
well,
life we all live in right now?
well, I think, what you're really talking about is being Black in this
I am.
current times. And how that affects me. So I have two children, two young adult children. My husband is Caucasian, so my kids are biracial. Um, I think that as a Black mother, there is an awareness that I have um, and a concern for my children being out in the world. And that is something that I believe has just been cellularly, in a sense, passed on because I knew I was Black by the time I was 3. I didn't know what that meant in total at 3, but I knew it made me different. I think then growing up in the United States and just seeing and experiencing what um, privilege and the lack of privilege means in this country is a reality that you can't, I mean, I feel like I can't always articulate that because sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's not so subtle. But it's connected to everything. It's like a spider web. And so I think when you think about the connectivity or the interconnectivity of events, situation, opportunity in our lives, um, race plays such a huge issue in it. And because there are so many systems that have been in place in the system in the United States, and most certainly in some in the world, it's just an awareness that I think um, people of color have that folks who are not of color may not have that. There's not a an awareness of when you go somewhere how you will be seen. If you walk in a store or a market, that you may be followed or you may be looked at differently because they're expecting that you might steal something. I've never stolen anything. So but to have that on you or that expectation on you, then it also means that I think that we are tasked with working harder to prove our own value, our own worth, and that we are good humans. And that's a lot. It's a lot to carry
Mhm.
because it doesn't give you a lot of time to breathe because it's like the breaths may be a little shallow because you're now thinking about the next thing. And
Mhm.
so it's a tough time. Um, I am amazed and awed by the fact that the world is paying attention.
Right.
And that is phenomenal to me because what's happening in the United States and the people who've died, Trayvon, Breonna, George, all these folks who have died, they're just a small, like, tip of the iceberg of all the people who have died at the hands of injustice, police brutality, or other kinds of brutalities that have led to their deaths. And I think that the fact that the world is kneeling and paying attention is something that just awes me. I'm awed because that is what gives me hope, um, in a sense, that it's not something that the world and that these young folks in the world are
Mm.
willing to just sweep under the rug anymore, or to just say it's okay because it's just happened there in Minneapolis, or it just happened there in Chicago, or it just happened, in these places. So um, that gives me some hope. I also know that it will take time. You don't dismantle systemic racism institutions, that have been around for centuries
Right.
in a
Mm.
matter of months, or even years. I mean, I feel like in some ways it may take decades for us to really advance to a level where it is not so institutionalized. But I don't feel that it's impossible, but I feel like perseverance
Right.
and commitment must happen, or else it could just be a movement that starts and then stops because once things calm down. So I'm really
Right.
hopeful that because the world has is paying attention and has stepped into this and said, no more,
Hmm.
and we acknowledge, we hear, we see, we care. All of those things are really important because for so many of us, for so much of our life, we haven't felt like we've had a voice that would be listened to or even cared about. If you hear
Right.
something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you care about it. You might say, "Oh yeah, that's something." Oh yeah, in that moment. But then when that moment passes, there's no connection or there's no commitment to what you just heard. So
Right.
it's a very it's just a really tough time. I've shed a lot of tears, um,
Myself included.
and
Yeah.
feeling
Yeah.
somewhat helpless in terms of how do you make change. One of the things that I'll share with you that has been really a difficult thing for me is the different protests that have happened in Santa Cruz. And I just give Santa Cruz so many props for the number of peaceful protests that have happened. The paddle out in the ocean that I think happened yesterday or the day before for George Floyd. And it it's just an amazing place to be and an amazing time. But I chose not to go out there because I didn't want to potentially expose my
Right.
family member to COVID. And so I feel, a little definitely limited in the way I can participate, and have my presence be known
Right.
in terms of these events. But, um,
You're feeling it in
but
the heart. You're feeling it in the heart,
I
though.
do feel it in the heart. I did my gospel show on Sunday and got to do my tribute to, there was a local sheriff's deputy who got killed in the line of duty in a not a protest kind of situation, but in a situation where he was doing his job and they were ambushed, and
Right.
it was really tragic. But I was able to pay tribute to the good service of sheriff's deputies, police, because
Right.
not all police and sheriff's deputies, there's not always that brutality. There are good people in
Right.
all walks and all of these places. And that I believe needs to be acknowledged too. So I was really happy to be able to offer my condolences to the family and friends and the community um, for the work of this officer. And then I was able to also say the names and just pay tribute to the people who are saying the names of the folks who have been killed and, and brutally killed. And that
Right.
made me happy. It gave me a sense of peace. It gave me a sense of contribution. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that's the part we can do in little tiny snippets. That vibration of each one of us is vibrating. I did some research on this, and I was reminded my nonprofit was devoted at the time in 2010 to bringing anti-bully programs. And one of the programs I love was Challenge Day out of Oakland, and where they were coming into high schools and doing incredible things. They were breaking down those barriers, those labels, those different ideas that we're taught. We're taught in our schools and some families and some religions to do this constant separation. Even the word make America great again. It's been hard for me because I think of it as the labels themselves, not, there are some bad human beings out there, whether they're color or whether they're a police officer. There are some just bad people that have gone possibly astray concerning a deeper, I would say it goes deep. It goes deep. A lot of times it's where you come from and families and the upbringing and not a good life. I worked in the prisons, but there was somebody speaking about that like not, again, going back to your phrase of not all police officers are bad, but I was going, they're human beings too. They're vibrating too. What do you think? They're vibrating with all of this too.
absolutely. And I believe, I worked in county government and for a number of years,
What
and in
did you
court.
do, by the way, Gail?
So I worked in the court system as a court supervisor. I was in court as a courtroom clerk. So I did that for 16 years. And then I became the clerk of the Board of Supervisors for Santa Cruz County. And then I was a city clerk. And then I became the clerk of the board for Monterey County. So in each of those roles, I had, the pleasure and the privilege of working with sheriff's deputies that were absolutely committed and good people, committed to the work of protecting their community and doing it in the best way possible. Now, I think going back to what you were saying about, what always comes to mind for me is that children have to be taught to hate and
Yes.
fear. And
Yes.
with our theater backgrounds, it just made me think about in one of the plays that we did in high school, South Pacific, there's the song in there about you've got to be taught to hate and fear. It is so poignant, it is so true, and it is always timely right now, which
Right.
is really sad.
I know.
Um, so I think that as we look at what we are teaching and what our kids are potentially learning, that to me is a really powerful thing. And as you talk about separation, there's so many, I guess, sort of venues that is being taught, anywhere from, from religious institutions, different, from social institutions. I think whenever an institution tells you or preaches or supports the otherness of someone
Right.
else,
Right.
that should be a red flag.
That should be a red
And
flag.
that I think
Absolutely.
is should be a red flag. And because, really change begins with the individual. It's not,
Yes.
um, I can't change you, I can't change anyone else. But I think if you have a, I guess, a social barometer, a personal, ethical, human barometer, that there would be something that would say, when someone is telling me that this person is other than me, less than, more than, whatever it is, that should be a red flag.
Right.
Um, so that is one of the things that as I look at my young adult children and see that the way we have really tried to, I guess, educate them, because that is what we do as parents, no matter what people say,
Yeah.
and try to instill in them a sense of who they are, and so that they can really find that and understand more of who they are and know that it's an ongoing thing. It's not like you get it and you have it for the rest of your life. I think it is something that continues to develop,
Right.
most certainly as you have experiences in life and meet people and experience people. So I really have hope that the young people are more enlightened than we were at the same age,
Right. Right.
and that our parents and grandparents were at the
Right.
same age, and that that is really our hope for the future. So
We've been groomed over centuries with this way of looking at people and labeling them
absolutely.
and putting them into categories. You know, it's interesting. Marshall Rosenberg, who was, he passed, but he was head of nonviolent communication. And that was really big within my nonprofit. Said it's going to have to take a consciousness shift for because people have needs, basic needs, and people are throwing out their needs in awkward ways, especially in communication with each other. Feelings and needs, he talks about. We all have the same exact feeling and needs. So I've always gone back to the arts, drama. I'm a musician, you know. We need those back in the schools because that's where our feelings lie. That's where we feel. And then on top of that is you know, just basically starting maybe some empathy classes, you know, really fine tuning empathy classes that are some curriculum of some kind, you know?
And you're talking about in the actual school system itself, right?
Right. I mean, I'd love it at home, but sometimes homes aren't as functional as others, and that's a bit hard to do. But an empathy class, it can't be that hard to implement, maybe, you know?
Well, I think that that would really take the school system really looking at the whole child, not just that you have to give them reading, writing, and arithmetic kind of thing as the education that they're going to need to take out into the world. And I do believe that there is some movement. I'm not a teacher and I haven't worked as a teacher. I have some relatives who are teachers, but I do believe that until there is this awareness of educating the whole being, the whole person,
Exactly.
then I think that would be an opportunity to have empathy classes, meditation classes, because I also think that there's something to having kids know how to be still, to be able to
Absolutely.
meditate, that not every moment of their life has to be connected to something else, but to be still in themselves. And you know, our world is so connected now with cell phones, and you have information coming at you all the time. And I
Correct.
think that bombardment is also one of the things that contributes to the overload. So I'm not saying there's not good things out of it, because we are so much more connected and through the world. And I think that what's happening in the world is a real indication of that. But I think at the same time, you know, to have your children understand that they don't have to have every moment occupied, but that when they do have something in their life, that there's a value in it. And so I say again, like, just to have the whole person educated is real will really, I think, take a shift in how we look at our education system and really what we want our children to come out of the systems that we put in place. And again, those systems are also incredibly biased
Right.
and racist in terms of how children are treated, how children are labeled, as you were mentioning, and how sometimes they can't get out of those labels. Once they get there, they stay on them like another kind of coat
Oh,
or
I
something.
know. I know.
And
I
that
know.
is really a difficult thing. So,
It is.
and I think that as a parent, that's one of the things that I knew. I didn't want my kids to be labeled in that, because I knew it was something that would stick with them through the whole education system, so to
Right.
speak. So
Right.
those are things that, you know, that kind of systemic change is, it's got to start somewhere,
It's got to
obviously.
start. It's got to
But, and
start.
I believe that there has to be some serious perseverance, some serious commitment to a plan of action so that it can be implemented and carried forward by um, even if the folks who are the implementers, the initial implementers, if they sort of cycle out, but that there's a succession planning aspect to that kind of planning and trying to dismantle some of the systemic things that are just unsuccessful, unhelpful, hurtful to people and children. So,
Well, I mentioned to you, and I dropped the waterline. That means, getting below, as Challenge Day says, what's below the 10% that we show ourselves, like an iceberg. What's down below the 80%. And I admitted to you that, walking down an alley sometimes, and I pass someone of color, there is an instant, there is a little something back here that's filed, other than the alertness of being a woman, period. But, you know, is this person going to, I have to have a discussion in my head to go, no, they're just walking like I am, down the street. And so I'd like to break that. I'd like to completely break that. It's difficult. It's difficult.
well, I think we're taught these things. We learn these things from such a young age. And while you say you walk down and you feel like you have to question whether or not you're safe, I have to do the same thing with,
Right.
right? I may do the same thing with someone who's white, or Caucasian
Right.
as I walk down is, am I safe? Do they have intentions of hurting me, or do they have intentions of, you know, do they have intentions of somehow hurting me or making me other or making me less than? And that is an unfortunate thing, because I do believe that for our generation, generations, before us, and even some of our younger generations, that is something that I think we do pass on, whether we do it verbally
Mhm.
to our children or the young folks, or we pass it on through other kind of imagery in terms of what are the movies and the films, what is it that people consume the information, and
Right.
whatever kind of mediums, right, do
Right.
they consume, and that help them make decisions or make determinations of what is safe and not safe, who's good, who's not good, those kind of things. So I think there's just that spider web is so intricate on so many levels, and I believe that it's going to take so many commitments on all these different strands of this spider web that ideally move toward um, a kind of, I guess I want to say, a cohesive center, but I don't necessarily think that's the most accurate way to put it.
I do think of it as a conscious shift, a conscious shift.
Yeah, I
Now,
mean, I do. I agree.
I really want to touch on before we head out. Most of my talks. It sounds like we could keep going, my friend, but I love this. I love it. But I really wanted to briefly talk about this play that you wrote that was so well received, just to give people an idea of how you shifted. I think you were trying to get people to shift. Go ahead and explain that play.
Yeah. So the play was called Waking Up. It was submitted to a 10-minute play festival that we have in Santa Cruz, and it was actually selected as one of the 16 finalists, and it was produced in January of 2020. And the premise of the play is that a very affluent white family wakes up Black, and their Black maid wakes up white, and their son wakes up Latino. And so, in the course of the 10 minutes, which, I really feel like I was divinely guided in this story, it really challenged them. There were a lot of stereotypes that I had put in there because I wanted the audience to be able to feel some discomfort. I wanted them to feel some awareness and maybe hopefully have some aha moments about what would it be like for you to walk in the skin of someone else who's
Right.
Black, and what would that be like, all those things that you were saying about if you had woken up Black and you were then thinking about, I'm walking down an alley and there are Black people, would you feel more comfortable, or would you still have those same kind of ideas
Right.
or thoughts? So
Right.
that was the power of the play. It was really real well received. um, a lot of people came up, emailed, texted, called, and just were really impacted by it. And I had this one woman say to me that her family had an intense discussion about the play and some of the things that happened in the play. there was humor in it, there was some poignancy in it, and there was a message in it as well, or messages. So
Mhm.
it was a really powerful thing, and I'm just really grateful that it was selected as one of the winners, and it was so well received.
Wow, I'm so proud of you, and I wish that we could bring it here to PCPA. You're going to have to though make it about an hour and a half, 2 hours, right, of a play. So, phew.
I know. I
But
did have some people who wanted me to expand it and make it longer than
well, there
10
you
minutes, and
go. Get on
I
it,
kind of
girl.
went, oh,
Well, hey, I want to end on a lighter note. You had a great, loving, I almost took it as a loving story at Costco. Can you share with our audience before we end what happened at Costco?
yeah. So I'm, one of the mask wonders in Costco a couple weeks ago, probably a week and a half ago. And as I was walking down one of the aisles looking for vitamins, which I was in the wrong aisle, there was a woman across the aisle from me, and we were going in opposite directions. Our carts were pointed in opposite directions. And she leaned over to me and kind of reached with her hand, not touching, but she reached with her hand and she said, I just want to tell you how sorry I am and how much I'm just so sad. I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember all the words, but how sad and upset I am by what's happening in the world. And I want you to know that I just really feel for you and, the Black community and the lives that are being affected. It was one of the most poignant and powerful things. And I said to her, I said, I am so grateful that you reached out and initiated this conversation, because if nothing else, this is what is a good thing. This is a good thing coming out of this for the people who are willing to have these conversations, even though they may be awkward, they may be uncomfortable, but to actually be willing to reach out or to connect, to hear, listen,
Mhm.
and then be able to say, thank you, or I appreciate this time, the conversation. That is really powerful, because I believe that that's going to help implement and grow the change that we need as
Yeah,
well. So it was really a fabulous conversation. We talked for about 15 minutes in the store. And,
yeah.
one of the other things she said was, her family lives in another country. And when she was talking to one of her cousins, she was saying the cousin was first saying how they just thought the United States was just the end all be all in terms of social justice, affluency, just economic stability, being a role model to the world before 2016. And now that isn't the case. They don't see it as the same way, because they see so much divisive behavior and rhetoric coming out of the White House and out of places where it's just not positive. So it's really impacted. But the conversation between her and I was just really powerful. It gave me hope. And when I relayed that to my family, I think that even my kids were just really pleased to hear that this was an unprompted, conversation about, we are in this together, and I really feel your pain. And I'm really, I guess in a sense, like wanting to acknowledge that to you. I do feel that pain, and it makes me sad that this is my country, and yet this is what's happening in it. So,
That's a beautiful story, and it kind of ties in with a T-shirt I was given from the writer Catherine Ryan Hyde, who wrote "Pay It Forward." She lives in
uh-huh.
Cambria, and it's "Make America Kind Again," and I like wearing that shirt a
Oh yeah,
lot.
I've
And
seen that.
yeah, and it's my kind of, that's where I'm at. I think that's where you're at. I think the majority, thank goodness in the world, if I may say so, the more majority of people are good. And so I wish to focus more on that and the goodness of our children too, because they're coming up in this world and we don't want them fear-based about everything. But
Yeah, and I
wow.
think that we have to. I think that as we really do focus on, when you put energy in something,
Mhm.
that, it becomes a focus. And so I think that is a really powerful thing to think about, focusing energy in the kind ways, not ignoring or not disregarding those painful things, because I do think that that is another aspect of
Right.
who we are and what we feel. But I believe that focusing on make America kind again, because I always said when they were saying make America great again, it was really make America white again. And it was like, well, it hasn't really been white, when you think about this.
No, no, there's
So
so
making
much
it
we could go into.
right,
Even
and making it kind is such a powerful thing. And I am right there with you. And I would love to be able to find out how to get a shirt or two or five.
Well, I'm going to hopefully interview her down the line, so maybe I could pull some strings. And I'm going to probably start selling our shirts, which is one heart, and on the back, where everyone feels safe, loved, and celebrated for who they are. It's on the
Oh,
back, but
uh-huh.
you can't
Okay.
read. You can't read it, but it's backwards. But I really, really want to thank you for taking your time today and sharing your story. I didn't know you worked at the court system, so there is a wealth of information there, I'm sure.
Oh,
Um,
delight. That's a long time ago. I mean, I
it,
did that years and years ago. But yeah, I definitely did influence a lot of my attitude, or my awareness, I should say. So yeah, I mean, I think that everything we do, everything that we express or feel or experience, has an impact. Like it sits somewhere in us, whether we are aware of it, or whether it's something
right,
that goes deeper, or it's a little bit closer to the surface, to pull on. It still always, I think, has some kind of an impact on us. So
right. Ugh, I love it. Okay, well, thank you so much. I want to go, as I say, and dive over your left shoulder into that ocean because it's a little hot today here. But
it's warm here too. Definitely getting
okay.
warmer and warmer. So
Want to thank you again. I want to thank my audience. Please stay tuned. I've got another featured guest coming up at the end of this week. You'll want to tune in for that. And again, thank you, Gail.
my
And
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
we will be replaying this for all of you interested. And I've got a variety of videos on oneheartinfo.org where you can catch all these videos plus One Heart TV on YouTube channel. All right, we're going to say love, peace to you all, and have a wonderful day. Stay cool. Bye bye.